Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons. And joining me today to preview the 3-game set with the Chicago Cubs is Ryan Herrera from CHGO Cubs. What's going on, buddy?
How's it going, man? Good to see you. It's been a while.
Likewise. I know in texting you behind the scenes, it was like, oh, wait a minute, we got to catch up on some wrestling too.
Oh, yeah.
Two marks over here. That could be the spin-off podcast where we talk baseball and wrestling. I'd be listening.
There you go.
That's it. News just broke before we talk about the Cubs about it being official. These City Connect jerseys have a 3-year cycle. And by that, I think you just have to wear them a minimum of 3 years. I don't know that you have to get a new one after 3 years, but nevertheless, the Colorado Rockies are going to be getting a new City Connect for 2025. I'm a little disappointed because I think it's one of the best. I'm not biased. I am not biased in anything, or at least I try not to be, even though I'm here in Colorado. But if you look at top rankings, the top 30, there's 28 teams that have them. Rockies are always in the top 5. And I don't know. I'm disappointed. You don't see things that way, though, do you, Ryan?
No, I will agree that the Rockies one is probably one of the better ones in baseball, but I'm not a huge fan of most of them. I'll be honest. The City Connects since they've been coming out, have mostly disappointed me. Like we set off the air, like the White Sox came out first, and that one was so nice that it kind of set a high bar for everyone. So it's hard to reach what the White Sox did, but have they like dropped the what it's going to look like, the new Rockies jersey?
No, okay. Not yet. Okay. Yeah, that will be interesting. I don't know what they're going to do. Like when they went with the license plate gimmick, it was different, and some people trash them for that, but they've typically, a lot of Colorado teams are going with something that looks like the Colorado state flag, which is iconic. It's one of the best state flags, so they could go that route, and that would be fine, and that would sell fairly well. But I just thought with the green, and it's wild to think that with all the City Connects, there wasn't a ton of purple like that. Green and purple were two colors that really aren't used very much in baseball. So I don't know. We'll see. Are the Cubs? I mean, the Cubs one is fine with the Wrigleyville. Okay, concept, but I bet you their next one is going to be really good, only because it probably has nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't heard anything about a new Cubs City Connect coming. I think the again, I go back to the Sox, and the Sox one was so cool. And then when the Cubs one came out after it felt like a disappointment because it didn't match how cool the Sox one was. I do think the Wrigleyville one grew on people, especially Cubs fans. So maybe they stick with it. That it looks better than I originally thought. Like it's grown on me as well. So maybe they stick with it. We haven't heard anything about a new City Connect, so I guess we'll see.
Mark my word. They're going to incorporate green for the Ivy at Wrigley, and it's going to be one of the best. That's my prediction for the future.
It's possible. It's possible. They gotta honor the Ivy somehow.
Yeah, I think that'll be the next one. That'll be the next one for them. All right, let's jump into the elephant in the room. Kris Bryant. Actually, let's back up half a step here. When you hear Colorado Rockies, when we get to the off season, and we're not in a weekend like now where you are thinking a lot more about the specific matchups of a series. When you hear the name Colorado Rockies, what player comes to mind for you right now, Ryan?
Brenton Doyle, because he was on my fantasy team and he was really good. No, I guess for me, obviously covering the Cubs, coming from Chicago, like Kris Bryant is the guy that's going to be connected with the Cubs forever. And, him going to Colorado was sort of a surprise a couple of years back, and it's been pretty disappointing overall to see just what's happened to him since he's been out there. That's a name that's always going to come to mind, regardless of what team he's on. It's the same thing with, I think of the Yankees, like Rizzo comes to mind. One of the first names that come to mind. Detroit, Javier Baez is one of the first names that come to mind. Just those guys that, cemented their place in Cubs history by being on that World Series team. They're always going to be connected in some way.
It's interesting you bring those up because I wanted to talk about that quartet that was all traded at the 2021 deadline. And, some of those prospects are making their presence felt now for the Cubs. But does the past 3 seasons with their new teams that they've all been with, does that change at all how you reflect on their careers in Chicago or the championship that was won in 2016?
No, it doesn't change, and I don't think it should. I think those guys created a legacy in Chicago that sets itself apart from like, especially we just consider in Cubs history, like those guys all had good Cubs careers and also won a World Series. Like you can't take that away from them. That's something that Javier Baez said when he came back is about a month ago now. When Detroit was in town, like that was the first time he'd been back since he'd been traded. And he kind of said it is like you're always going to be a champion here. Nobody can take that away from you, right? So that's always something like for me, maybe other people feel differently, but for me, it's like their Cubs career is separate from what's gone on in the 3 years since. That's kind of how I look at it because those guys were so important to the Cubs organization, Cubs history, making history, breaking a World Series drought. That's how I like to look at it because especially because for basically all three of them, things haven't gone great for them since they've moved on, and you can even include like Wilson Contreras in there. Obviously, the broken arm, was it broken forearm or something like that, getting hit by a swing earlier in the year. You like to reflect on the good times, especially while the Cubs aren't very good right now. Well, they're better, but they're not looking like a playoff team. You reflect on the good times, and those guys were all part of the good times, at the most recent good times.
I wonder if you polled fans or even pundits or journalists after 2021, like who is going to have the better career going forward between Bryant, Baez, Schwarber, and Rizzo. I don't know how many people would have said.
Schwarber's another guy, and I forgot about. There's another name that I didn't mention, but he's part of that too.
He's had the best. He's been the best of that quartet, like easily. Wonderful tool on Baseball Reference where you can compare players, and when you look, literally every category from wins, games, plate appearances, hit. Baez has the most stolen bases. Schwarber's not stealing. Kris Bryant has the highest batting average in 250, but everything else, Kyle Schwarber is first in that quartet. Even has been an all-star and won a Silver Slugger Award, where those other three haven't yet. And I don't know how many people, you would have a better idea being in there in Chicago, would have actually had Schwarber as being the guy that was going to be the one that had the better career going forward.
Yeah, well, and the reason I didn't even say Schwarber is like he wasn't even part of that deadline. He was before that season just non-tendered, right? At $10 million, something like that would have been, and non-tendered, and you kind of just forget that also happened like 9 months or so beforehand, before the big trade deadline sell off at 21. Yeah, I mean, you felt like Kris Bryant had a couple injuries towards the end of his Cubs career, but he was still young and was prime of his career, former MVP. Like I would have thought he was the guy that would have the better career moving forward. Like Javi Baez, you just didn't really know. Obviously he had a really good peak, second, a runner up in the NL MVP, but then he was a guy that just felt like wasn't really evolving with the game. So it was kind of a toss up on what he was going to do. Rizzo was getting older. Look at Wilson Contreras, a guy that maybe he was going to be the guy that had the better career because he was younger. He's a catcher, he's a great hitter. But yeah, Schwarber's been the guy since he went to, was it Washington to start 2021, then got traded to Boston, now in Philly. Like the guy just hitting a ton of home runs. Like who cares about average when you're hitting 40 home runs? He's leading off for the Philly. I think he broke the record for most leadoff home runs this season, something like that, earlier in the week. He's been the guy, one of the guys for the Phillies these last few years. I will say that one of the things that he's talked about since getting non-tendered is that he felt like he kind of needed it because of he struggled in 2020. I think there was a point where he wasn't getting very much better. You weren't seeing the development and the improvements you wanted to see. Not that that's why the Cubs non-tendered him. It was like pretty much purely a financial, like we need to cut some money off the budget type thing. But I think Schwarber has also kind of noted that like, I kind of needed that kick in the ass there, because that's what getting non-tendered does. You realize you gotta make some changes, you gotta make some improvements, and clearly he's done that in the last 3 years now.
It's interesting because similar situation with Cody Bellinger, who we'll talk about in just a second. But with Kris Bryant, still got $108 million due to him over the next 4 years. Baez, his contract isn't much better for the Tigers, only 3 more years remaining. But I don't know how much more the Rockies are going to be seeing of Kris Bryant. Certainly this year, it seems like he's going to be done. He's still around the team. You see him in the dugout, but his back injury is pretty serious. I don't think he can really come back and be as close to the same player that he was. And I'm not sure if he's going to be able to come back. I think if you slot him in as somewhat the permanent DH, at least when he's healthy, you're fine. The Rockies, believe it or not, have kind of money to burn a little bit. So it's not as if his contract's, killing them. I also don't think you can offload his contract and save some money, which the Rockies were able to do in part in the Nolan Arenado trade. So they're just kind of stuck. Bryant's just kind of stuck, and it's really an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, no, it's again, it sucks. It's like this guy was. I'm not saying he was absolutely a Hall of Famer, but he was in a way on that trajectory before injuries at the end of his Cubs career. Obviously, with the Rockies now, like have taken a lot of good years away from him. He's not getting any younger. What is he like 32, 33 now, something like that? Like he's
30. I think he's still just 31. He
still
did he turn
31. Okay.
32? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But he's still he's over 30. We know over 30 is like that line that guys just generally historically production falls off after 30. So he's not getting any younger. He's not. It doesn't seem to be getting any healthier. I've read different pieces of Kris Bryant talking about not just like the physical struggles, but the mental struggles that come with the physical struggles out in Colorado. Like it sucks. It really does suck to hear what's happened with Kris Bryant because, like I said earlier, like he was such a big part of the Cubs organization. Watching that Cubs team from the mid 2010s to 5-6 years or so, he was huge. He was arguably Anthony Rizzo was probably the face of the team, but Kris Bryant was the best player on that team. So just to see what's happened in the last few years, mainly due to injuries, it is tough to see because not only do you not want to see that for any player, you want every player to be able to be healthy, play 162 games, like get all the opportunities, in front of them and be able to take advantage of them. But particularly for a guy, obviously, like I said, coming from the Cubs, big part of Cubs history, it does hurt even more to just kind of see that he's had so much time taken from him because of the health.
Rookie of the Year in 2015, MVP in the National League in that year where they break the World Series drought. And yes, 32 years old, going on 33 next year. And I forget about him, frankly, in covering this team. He does get forgotten about because of the fact that he's only played 159 games. Think about that. In his 3 years in Colorado, he's yet to even play 162 games yet. So the mental pieces, I think, is a big part because I think we started seeing that a little bit in 2023 last year where the injuries became, a big part of his game, or rather taking away the game that he had been so noted for being able to contribute offensively. And it was so interesting in that series at the end of the year in September in Chicago, Bryant's first time back at Wrigley since 2021. He came back with the Giants like right after he got traded, but he had some time away, had the rough first season in Colorado in 2022 where people were already lambasting him and the contract. And then 2023, it's more of the same. And for him to get that standing ovation and being there for that, I could see that look on his face and in his eyes of how much he appreciated that and almost how much he needed that to remind him like, hey, I'm still Kris Bryant. I'm still this guy. I still was a part of this historical team, as you mentioned. And maybe that could have, boosted him into the off season to get himself right. But unfortunately, the back issues has been so serious. No talk of a surgery yet, but still, you're right. I think the mental piece is now just as much of a factor as the physical one.
Yeah. And again, it's at the end of the day, that sucks to see, sucks to hear for a guy that has a lot of respect. I mean, had a lot of respect in baseball in general, right? But a lot of respect in Chicago. I'm sure when he got to Colorado, people were very excited about the signing because of who he was and what he'd done in Chicago. It's tough to see, and all you can do is, I guess, hope for better health next year. Just hope for good things for him moving forward.
It's a really young team, and if Charlie Blackmon does not return for 2025, Kris Bryant definitely becomes much more of a veteran presence and can contribute at least behind the scenes in a lot of ways for these young guys. Now, this weekend, the pitching matchups are going to be Austin Gomber coming back from the paternity list on Friday against Javier Assad. Saturday, an early 6:10 game, Freeland against Jamison Tyon. And on Sunday, it might say Bradley Blaylock, but it's more likely than not going to be Cal Quantrill returning from a right triceps inflammation off the IL against Kyle Hendricks on Roberto Clemente Day. Could even get Antonio Cinzatella on Monday, returning from the IL after Tommy John surgery last year, which is pretty good. I know the Cubs have been really good on the road as of late since August 1st, 12-5, one of the best road records in the majors. Great batting average on base and OPS in road games. So they could really have a lot of fun, especially considering they score a full run more on the road than they do at home at Wrigley.
Yeah, no, they've been the road warriors for a while now. Like it is kind of jarring to look at, and if you just go like by the season numbers where they're at offensively when they're playing at home versus playing on the road, a lot better on the road than at home. And you don't often see that, and on vice versa, the pitching stats. Their pitching stats are pretty good at home, and on the other end of the spectrum when they're on the road. So for whatever reason, Wrigley just hasn't been a hitter's ballpark very much this year. It's actually been tough, and being at the ballpark as often as I am, like there are a lot of days where the wind is blowing in, wind's blowing in off the lake and making it hard to hit over there. So yeah, like you mentioned, like this is a team that when they this last homestand, they struggled to score against the Pirates, struggled to score against the Yankees. But prior to that, when they were on the road, they were doing pretty well, putting up a lot of numbers. They put up a lot of runs in LA this week. So Colorado, we know, is a place where a lot of runs can be scored. And, Cubs are motivated. Obviously, they're not completely out of the playoff picture. The odds are quite low, but they're not out of it yet. So they still got something to play for. This is this potential series for a lot of runs to be scored. Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to watch that. It's always fun to watch those high scoring affairs.
5 games back of the final wild card spot in the National League, would have to overtake both the Mets and Atlanta. Not impossible if they go on an Rocktober type run like the Rockies did in 2007. Seems like a lot of teams the Rockies are playing right now almost have to win out. So it's not impossible. Cubs aren't eliminated. They are above 500. Who to watch this week? For me, probably the number one player right now has to be Pete Crow Armstrong. He debuted last year at Coors Field, struggled a little defensively in that series. I think he got thrown out on the bases too, but he seems to have flourished a lot with his glove. He makes good contact, speedy guy. So obviously he can just put the ball in play and do incredibly well. 11 outs above average in the 97th percentile, ranking 6th amongst major league center fielders. So him and Brenton Doyle going to be doing some interesting battle this weekend.
Yeah, no, Pico Armstrong has been. You mentioned he debuted about a year ago. I think it was September 11th last year in Colorado. Like it's about a year now, and he's just a completely different player than what, at least hitting wise, than he was at that point last year. Honestly, since the end of July, he looks like a completely different hitter. Part of it is a swing change, a little more of a leg kick that he added. Worked in drills with hitting coaches in kind of implementing that. And in the last month and a half, I don't remember the exact amount of games or what the exact stats are, but like the dude is hitting the baseball so well. Like it's like a 140 something, maybe 150 WRC plus since then. And that's in like, I don't know, 150 plate appearances. Like it's a pretty solid sample size, and he's been hitting the ball really well since the end of July. That's coming at the bottom of the order, the number 8 spot. So it's lengthening the lineup a little bit. And then you add in, as you said, the speed. So he can bunt for a base hit, but he can also turn a single into a double just by stealing second base. He's been doing that a lot this year, been doing it really well. And his defense, like that's the number one thing for me. His defense in center field, he may be the best defender in baseball. Like his instincts are so great. The reads and jumps he gets on balls make what you feel like is going to be a sure double into the gap, and he gets there easily. And he's done that all year, and it continues to be like he made that look so easy. I know it's not, right? And then some of the catches he was making in LA, was getting put on highlight reels. Like that's like if that's his like his homecoming or his breakout on the national stage, like that was it. But I don't know if this dude's gonna gonna win a Gold Glove this year. I think there's obviously some other guys that have real cases for it, but the way the guy plays the outfield, he is a Gold Glover, like a perennial Gold Glove candidate for the rest of his career. The way he plays the outfield, so I like that you picked him because he's so exciting to watch, and haven't really had a guy like him in a while. Honestly, since I guess Morel, you can make an argument for, but maybe even since Javier Baez, the way he plays both sides of the ball, it's been a lot of fun to watch him this year. Watch him grow.
I'm glad you added in Gold Glove candidate because, again, your boy on your fantasy team, Brenton Doyle. Let's not forget about him. So that'll be fun to watch them trade off and on great plays. There's another rookie too on the Cubs right now that I find to be interesting. Porter Hodge, rookie closer who already has 3 outs of a no-hitter under his belt, 14 straight scoreless appearances since August 4th, spanning 15 innings, 4th longest active streak amongst major league relievers. So he's another one of those guys that will help the Cubs shorten some games a little bit and see if they can come away with the series win.
Yeah, he's if I remember correctly, he's in Double-A to start the year, had barely gotten promoted to Triple-A, and the Cubs just needed arms. And he was on the 40-man roster, so they brought him up. And Craig Counsell said, even at the beginning, this is probably even a little bit fast for him, just kind of the way things had gone during spring training, and they knew the things they knew he needed to work on and improve on. Said that it's probably a little bit fast for Porter, but obviously they needed a healthy arm. And he's come up, and I think he went down for a little bit in June. He got optioned down, and then since then he's been back up and has been earning more and more high leverage opportunities to the point that now the Cubs traded Hector Neris back in August, or designated him for assignment, released him, not traded him. I think they tried to trade him at the deadline, but that didn't happen. But designated him for assignment, released him, opened a spot in the 9th inning, and Porter Hodges really took that opportunity and ran with it. As you mentioned, the stats. What do you say is 14 consecutive something? What was the stat you put on?
Yeah, 14 scoreless outings, 15 total scoreless innings.
There you go. I didn't realize it had gotten that long, but when you say that, it doesn't sound surprising because he has been that good. So yeah, and I remember right around the trade deadline, we were in Cincinnati, and I kind of brought up Craig Counsell's his initial quote about Porter Hodge saying it was a little fast. I brought it back up to him and I said, just kind of, what do you think? How do you think he has handled it if it was that fast? And he said, I'll stand by saying that it felt a little fast, but then he said, Porter is someone that of everyone on that major league team probably has shown the most growth from spring training. High praise from a manager like Craig Counsell. Obviously, again, a young guy making a rookie in the major leagues and is closing games. He's a guy that he has proved a lot and improved a lot this season and looks like a stalwart of the Cubs bullpen moving forward at a young age. And we'll see. We'll see if he can keep those, if he'll get an opportunity to keep those streaks going in Colorado. But he's been someone that, again, a young guy, first foray into the big leagues, and is doing it with the kind of confidence you don't often see in guys like that in the 9th inning. We know the 9th inning is it takes a little bit more moxie to be able to close games. He seems to have that, and he's another guy that's been fun to watch just grow and develop this year.
Who we won't be watching, who I won't be watching, who no one will be watching. Another rookie, Shota Imanaga, not starting this weekend. Disappointment. But we'll be watching Cody Bellinger. But the last question I have for you is, what's his future with this franchise? Because he can return. He's got a player option for $27.5 million. And then in 2026, another $25 million. He just turned 29, so he's still at a good age to make a nice contract, but he's just having an okay year, right? And I don't know, is he going to opt out? Is it going to be one more year and then hopefully he can parlay it better? Does the free agent class of this offseason maybe determine whether or not he tests the free agent market?
Yeah, we talked about this on our show recently. I'd still say and it's definitely not I'm very, very confident either which way. I think my lean is still that he will opt out at this point with 2.5 weeks left to go in the season. he's having an okay year. But he's not having a bad year, and considering what I think it was like 21 and 22 were for him, like having a okay to solid year is a lot better than that. It's not quite what he did last season, his first year at the Cubs, but it's still an okay, solid year for him. I think one thing that works in his favor, like you said, he's 29. He's still young. I think he does want he wants a longer term deal. He may not get the AAV that he's getting with the Cubs, but a little bit more years, maybe just overall more money provides a little bit more security, as this might be the only big contract he gets in baseball. And defensively, he's a guy that plays all three or can play all three outfield positions very well, and also plays first base at a good level too. So you don't often find that in baseball, especially with a guy, a lefty bat, solid hitter. I think all that stuff kind of works towards, unless something really bad happens, unless he really tanks the last couple weeks or gets hurt, knock on wood for that, obviously, but unless something more of that ilk happens, my guess is that he's going to opt out and try to find a little bit longer term of a deal, a little bit more security long term.
And maybe his agent, Scott Boras, learns from this last offseason and says, I need to just kind of accept maybe what the market actually is and accept a good deal, which is still a great deal for all of us. Yeah. All right, Ryan, as you plug away and let folks know where they can get all your stuff at, also tell me who's going to win in the Hell in the Cell match between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre.
Oh, good question. So first, I'm at Ryan_A_Herrera at all, Instagram and Twitter, or I guess X. You can follow us at CHGO_Cubs on X as well. I believe that's our Instagram handle too. And that's a good question. I don't know. I think Drew McIntyre has to win, to be honest.
I think so. Yeah.
I think, he took match one. CM Punk took the strap match. I think Drew McIntyre's got to win the Hell in a Cell, man. You're building up a big time monster if you can pull that one off.
And I think that's sort of the message CM Punk needs to send to the locker room. Like, hey, I'm here to put other people over as well, so I will take the loss in this series. Yeah, I would agree. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB on TikTok, at Rockies_insider as well. Ryan, thanks for joining me and giving me plenty of momentum. But that momentum is only as good as my next show. So I will talk to you